5 rejection emails, 0 job offers, an empty wallet, and a growing feeling that life had already left him behind. Aiden sat alone on the old wooden porch of his small rented house, staring at his phone. Another email. We've decided to move forward with another candidate. He didn't even feel disappointed anymore. He just felt numb. He locked his phone and slipped it into his pocket. For a long moment, he watched the sun slowly disappear behind the trees. Maybe this is all my life will ever be, he whispered. Then, a calm voice broke the silence. Young man, come sit with me for 5 minutes. Aiden looked up. His elderly neighbor, Mr. Thomas, stood beside a small garden, gently watering bright red flowers. He smiled. Not the smile of someone who had never suffered, but the smile of someone who had survived it. Aiden had no idea. Those 5 minutes would change the rest of his life. The evening was warm. Birds sang in the distance. Children laughed somewhere down the street. The whole neighborhood felt alive, but Aiden felt completely disconnected from it. Every morning looked the same. Wake up, send job applications. Wait, receive another rejection. Sleep, repeat. It had been months. He had lost count of how many companies had ignored him. His savings were almost gone. His confidence had disappeared, long before his money did. Sometimes he wondered if there was something wrong with him. Maybe he simply wasn't good enough. Maybe everyone else was moving forward, and he was the only one standing still. Across the fence, Mr. Thomas continued, watering his flowers, as if he had all the time in the world. He never seemed rushed, never angry, never worried. Aiden couldn't understand it. Mr. Thomas, the old man looked over. Can I ask you something? Of course. How are you always so peaceful? Mr. Thomas smiled softly. Because I stopped fighting every storm. Aiden frowned. I don't understand. The old man placed the watering can on the grass. Then he walked toward the porch and slowly sat beside Aiden. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Mr. Thomas looked at him. You look like a man carrying the weight of the whole sky. Aiden laughed quietly. I think I am. He stared at the ground. I've tried everything. I work hard. I stay positive. I keep applying. But nothing changes. His voice became quieter. I'm tired, so tired. I don't even know who I am anymore. Mr. Thomas nodded. Then he said something Aiden never expected. I know exactly how you feel. Aiden turned toward him in surprise. You do? The old man looked toward the sunset. More than you can imagine. Mr. Thomas remained silent, as if he was deciding whether to open a door he had kept closed for many years. Finally, he spoke. 15 years ago, I wasn't the man you see today. I had no savings, no direction. My health was getting worse. I could barely climb the stairs without losing my breath. I avoided my friends because I was ashamed of the life I was living. He smiled sadly. Every morning I promised myself I would change. And every night I went to bed, exactly the same. Aiden listened carefully. It was impossible to imagine this calm old man living such a broken life. What changed? Mr. Thomas looked at him, then smiled. That's the interesting part. I didn't change overnight. There wasn't a miracle. There wasn't a lucky break. There wasn't even motivation. Aiden leaned forward. Then what was it? The old man looked toward his front door. His smile grew slightly wider. It all started with one decision. He paused. Aiden waited. So, what was the decision? Mr. Thomas chuckled quietly. It sounds so small. You'll probably laugh when I tell you. Aiden couldn't hide his curiosity. So, what was the decision? Mr. Thomas smiled. I made my bed. Aiden blinked. That's it? The old man laughed softly. I told you you'd think it was ridiculous. Aiden shook his head. Honestly, I expected something bigger. So did I, Mr. Thomas replied. For years I kept waiting for one big moment that would change my life. A better job. More money. More confidence. The perfect opportunity. The perfect opportunity. But none of those things ever came. So one morning, I stopped waiting. I stood up and I made my bed. Aiden looked confused. How can making your bed change? Someone's life? It can't, Mr. Thomas answered calmly. But keeping a promise to yourself can. The words stayed in the air. Aiden didn't say anything. The old man continued. The next morning, then I walked outside for 10 minutes. Just 10, no running, no impossible goals, no motivational speeches. Only one small promise, every single day. Aiden looked down at his hands. That still doesn't sound like enough. Mr. Thomas smiled. It wasn't, but it was enough to begin. The following week, Aiden decided to try. The next morning, he made his bed. It took less than 2 minutes. He almost laughed. This is supposed to change my life? Then he walked outside. 10 quiet minutes. Nothing magical happened. The next day, he repeated it. Then again and again. A week passed. Nothing changed. No job, no money, no exciting opportunities. His inbox stayed empty. His phone stayed silent. One evening, he walked back to Mr. Thomas's porch. You were wrong. The old man looked up from his book. Was I? I've done everything you said. I made my bed. I walked every morning. I even stopped wasting time on my phone. And guess what? My life is exactly the same. Mr. Thomas closed his book, without saying a word. He stood up. Come with me. They walked quietly into the old man's house. Mr. Thomas pointed toward a mirror, hanging on the wall. What do you see? Myself. Look again. Aiden frowned. I still don't understand. The old man smiled. No. You don't see the man who stayed in bed last week. You don't see the man who gave up. Every promise he ever made. You only see your face. But I see something else. Aiden looked at him. What? A man who has kept 7 promises. Silence filled the room for the first time. Aiden realized maybe something really had changed, just not where he had been looking. The next few weeks became even harder. Some mornings, rain poured outside. Some mornings, Aiden felt too tired to get out of bed. Sometimes, he stared at the ceiling thinking. One morning, he almost quit. He sat on the edge of his bed. His shoes were still on the floor. His room was quiet. No one would know if I stopped today. He whispered the words to himself. Then, he remembered Mr. Thomas. Keep one promise. Only one. Slowly, he stood up. He made the bed. He went outside. 10 minutes, nothing more. That evening, Mr. Thomas noticed the smile on Aiden's face. A good day? The old man asked. Aiden shook his head. Actually, Mr. Thomas laughed. Then why are you smiling? Aiden looked toward the sunset. Because for the first time, my day didn't control me. I controlled my day. Mr. Thomas nodded proudly. There it is. The change has finally begun. Aiden smiled. He still didn't have a job. He still wasn't successful. But deep inside, something felt different, something stronger. And without realizing it, he had already become the kind of man who would never give up again. 3 months passed. The changes were still small, but they were impossible to ignore. Aiden woke up before his alarm. His room stayed clean. His morning walks became 20 minutes instead of 10. He read every night instead of scrolling, endlessly on his phone. One afternoon, he looked in the mirror. For a moment, he stopped. His face hadn't changed much, but his eyes had. They no longer looked tired. They looked alive. A few days later, he saw a job opening he normally would have ignored. They're looking for someone with more experience, he thought. Before, he would have closed the page. This time, he applied anyway. A week later, his phone rang. Hello, is this Aiden? Yes. We'd like to invite you for an interview. For a second, he couldn't speak. At the interview, he noticed something strange. He wasn't pretending to be confident anymore. He simply was, he answered calmly. He smiled naturally, he listened carefully. When he walked out of the building, he didn't know if he had the job. But for the first time in months, he believed he deserved a chance. That evening, Aiden rushed to Mr. Thomas's house. I got an interview. Mr. Thomas smiled. I knew you would. Aiden laughed. You knew? No. I knew you would become the kind of man who was ready for one. They sat together on the porch as the sun slowly disappeared behind the hills. "I finally understand," Aiden said quietly. "It was never about making the bed." Mr. Thomas nodded. "No, it was about becoming someone who keeps promises." The old man looked toward the flowers in his garden. Most people spend their lives waiting for motivation. They think one day they'll wake up, feeling ready. But discipline comes first. Feelings come later. Aiden sat silently. Those words settled deep inside him. Mr. Thomas smiled gently. Life doesn't usually change in one big moment. It changes in hundreds of quiet moments that nobody else sees. 6 months later, everything looked different. Aiden had a steady job. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous, but he slept peacefully. He smiled more, and every morning, he still made his bed. One quiet evening, he sat on the same porch, where his journey had begun. Across the street, a young woman sat alone on her front steps. Her shoulders were slumped. Her phone rested in her hands. Tears filled her eyes. The picture felt strangely familiar. Aiden smiled. He walked over slowly. "You look like you're carrying the whole sky on your shoulders." She looked up in surprise. "How did you know?" Aiden smiled. "Because I used to feel exactly the same." She lowered her eyes. "I don't know where to start." Aiden looked toward Mr. Thomas's house. The old man was standing in his garden, quietly watering his flowers with the same peaceful smile. Their eyes met. Mr. Thomas gave a small nod. Aiden smiled back. Then he turned to the young woman. "Come, sit with me for 5 minutes. Sometimes, starting over doesn't begin with a better job, more money, or a perfect opportunity. Sometimes, it begins with one tiny promise that you keep to yourself day after day, until one morning, you realize you didn't just change your habits, you changed your life.